and then go ahead and get started.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think Jessica gave a good overview of what Bay Legal offers. I'm a staff attorney at Bay Area Legal Aid. I'm a bit less of a generalist than Jessica is when it comes to government programs. I primarily work in Calfresh, Calworks, and general assistance. I take cases out of Contra Costa and Alameda. And with that, give me just one moment and I can pull up the PowerPoint. Okay, can everybody see it?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that going. Great. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about a couple of programs, Calfresh, Calworks, General Assistance, Social Security, SSI, and some of the public charge rules. Oh, and also just, sorry, a quick aside, I apologize for not having my camera on. My computer has decided it simply does not wish to have the camera work ever, so apologies for that. But kicking us off with Calfresh. So what is Calfresh? So it's a nutrition program that provides monthly food benefits to households. These are issued monthly on an EBT card. And it's important to note that Calfresh is not a cash benefit, which means that there are, you do get money onto the EBT card, but there are limitations on how those funds can be used. You can buy food, you can buy seeds and plants to grow food, but you can't buy non-food items, things like cigarettes, diapers, toilet paper, medications, and in general, you can't buy hot foods or foods eaten in the store. There is an exception to that we'll talk about a little bit later. So Calfresh is given to households. And so the important question there is, who is in the household? So in Calfresh, a household is a group of people who, one, live together, and two, regularly purchase and prepare food together. Some important caveats here. The people in the same household do not need to be related. You can have more than one household under one roof. There are also a couple of mandatory household members. So people that if they do live together need to be in the same household. So spouses and children under 22 who are living with their parents all have to be in the same household together. In addition, there are some, so in general, there are many sort of categories of immigrants who are eligible, but there are a couple that aren't. So those who are eligible include lawful permanent residents, refugees, asylees, parolees, URT visa applicants and recipients, VAWA applicants, Cuban or Haitian entrants. But ineligible immigrants, so people who can't get Calfresh, are those who are undocumented or DACA recipients. So, what happens if you have a household that has some folks who are eligible and some who are ineligible? That's a mixed status household. Households that have some members who qualify and some don't. So it's important when that's going on that ineligible household members should specify that they are not applying for the benefit. They'll still have to provide some income information, but it's also important to note that people who are not household members that are receiving these benefits cannot be required to provide immigration status information. And it's also important to note that applicants should never give a fake social security number or any false or misleading information. It just is important to sort of not open that can of worms. We also have some special rules for those who are elderly or disabled. So elderly under Calfresh rules is anybody who is 60 or older, and anyone disabled is receiving a disability-based benefit with a test as stringent as the SSA disability test. This is an important caveat because the SSA disability test is, well, as the word implies, it's pretty stringent. So there are a lot of requirements there, and you might be disabled in some senses or disabled under some programs, but not necessarily rise to the level of the Social Security Administration's disability test. But there is also some good news here. SSI recipients are now eligible to receive Calfresh. This did not used to previously be true. This rule came into effect on June 1st of 2019. So if anybody ever comes to you and mentions that they were concerned about that, that is now perfectly acceptable. There are also some special rules for college students who are generally not eligible. There are lots of exceptions to this, though, so there are quite a few ways to sort of fit people in under these exceptions. If someone's employed for 20 hours a week, if they do work study and anticipate working during the school term, if they receive Calworks, and also if they have children. It's a sort of bright line rule that if you have a child under 6, that's going to be much more likely to come through. And if you have a child between 6 and 12, there are a couple of more terms and conditions that might apply, but that's also a possibility. If you're curious to know more about some of these rules, you can check out the ACIN, which is the All County Information Notice, 18915. Okay, so we know what Calfresh is, we know what a household is. So now we also have to look at the financial eligibility criteria for this program. So first we're going to take a look at income. Now, in order to be considered income, money has to be actually available or reasonably anticipated to be available to the household. Reasonably anticipated here is it's a term of art, and it means that the household needs to know the date and the amount of money that will be received. So, if you don't know the dates or you don't know the relative amount, it's not going to be reasonably anticipated. Now, some examples of things that aren't income, but that might feel like income. In-kind income, as it's called, so things like free housing or THP plus for former foster youth, earned income of a student under 18, the first $50 of Calworks child support pass-through benefits, any non-recurring lump sum payments, work-study income, some forms of student aid, tax returns. There are some others, and you can check out the Calfresh guide for more. That's put out by LSNC, LSNC, Legal Services of Northern California. The guide is great, always very up to date. All credit to Stephen Goldberg for being wonderful on that front. So once we sort of have our, once we know what the income is, we have the number in front of us. That number we need to run through 2 tests, which are the gross income test and the net income test. So we start off with the gross income test first, and that is that the household's income must be below 200% of the federal poverty level for most households of their size. If there is an elderly or disabled household member, then you don't have to worry about the gross income test, and so you can just sort of pass them through this stage of the assessment. If you look on the right side of the screen here, you'll see a table that lays out some of these numbers. We're right on the cusp of having the amounts increased. So starting on October 1st, just a couple of days, they'll go up a little bit. You can see here that it's divvied up by household size, and it's a little bit more lenient for everybody, starting in a couple of days. So some common deductions. So if you pass the gross income test, then the household gets to apply deductions, and that helps you get to the net income amount that will then compare against the net income test requirements. So some common deductions are, ooh, excuse me, the excess shelter deduction. So that is the monthly shelter cost is over 50% of the household's adjusted income. The maximum you can deduct from this is $597, but there is no maximum for households with elderly or disabled members. You can also deduct medical expenses under some situations. You must be elderly or disabled to be able to claim the medical deduction, and it's any unreimbursed medical expense over $35. The standard deduction is $120, so so in general, a lot of people will get that 120 deduction, but if it ever goes higher than that, you can, get to claim the actual amount that's spent. Some other common deductions are listed at the bottom of the screen. There are quite a few of them. Feel free, I think the Calfresh guide will probably have some as well. Okay, so we have our gross income, we've gone through and made all of the appropriate deductions, and now we have the net income for the household. So then we run it through the net income test guidelines. So there's also an important caveat here that 1- and 2-person households with an elderly or disabled member can qualify for the minimum benefit if they do not meet the net income test, but otherwise you'll have to sort of pass through this second set of criteria. So on the right side of the screen, once again, you can see what the requirements are for net income based on household size. And as with gross income, these numbers are going to go up coming very soon. So to keep that in mind in case you're running the numbers in the near future. So in addition to income, there there is a resource test. The resource limit for Calfresh is $3,250. However, it is important to note that most households aren't going to have to worry about the resource limit. However, households with at least one elderly or disabled member and with gross income over 200% of the federal poverty level will have to make sure that their income does not, or sorry, their assets do not exceed that $3,250 mark. There are some resources that are exempt or excluded. You can check the Calfresh guide if you want to sort of see some of those specifics. Here we have a list of the maximum monthly allotments that you can expect based on household size. Not to be a broken record, but as you can see, those numbers will be changing and going up in the very near future, which is good to know. And it's also important to note that it is often the case that two households will receive slightly more money than a combined household of the same size, which is just something to keep in mind when assessing eligibility. So we're now going to take a look at the application process. Applications can be filed in person at your local county welfare department. You can file them online at getcalfresh.org, or you can go through the county website. You can do mybenefitscalwin.org. You can also file an application over the phone in some counties, but it's not available everywhere, so always good to check. After your application is filed, the county staff should contact the client for an interview. This is generally done over the phone. And there are very good odds that the applicant is going to be asked to submit verification documents to the county. So it's very important that you submit these, because otherwise the application isn't going to be approved. And while we'll talk a little bit about verifications later on, it's also important to note that if documents can't be provided or something like that, you can also provide what are called collateral contacts, which is somebody who's not in the household but is willing to attest to the household circumstances. So some of these verifications that are going to be asked for are your income, social security number, where the person lives, identity, immigration status of non-citizens, medical expenses, child support payments, shelter costs. So there can be quite a few things that are asked for, and it's just important to do your best to get that sort of those verifications together, so that way you can provide them to the county, because they are required components. So you have a pretty good idea that you're eligible. You submitted your application. What can you expect in terms of a timeline? Regular applications should be processed within 30 days. So expedited service applications should be processed within 3 calendar days. However, expedited services, you need to meet certain requirements before that you can fall into that category. You need to have less than $150 in gross monthly income and less than $100 in liquid resources. You need to be or a destitute migrant worker with less than $100 in resources, or you need to be in a household where the gross income and resources are less than the monthly rent or mortgage and utilities. It's also important to note that benefits are approved back to the date of application. So even if it does take a little bit to maybe get some verifications together, or there's some other sort of hitch in the process, it's important to get the application in earlier, because you'll be approved back to when the application process was started. There are also some particular rules that apply to those people who are applying and unhoused. So you don't need to report an address, that's not a requirement, but you do need to make sure that you apply in the county in which you reside. Calfresh can be used at soup kitchens and farmers markets. And there's something called the Restaurant Meals Program, which allows people to use Calfresh to purchase prepared meals. So in order to qualify for this program, which is an exception to that general rule we talked about earlier, you need to be unhoused, elderly, or disabled. And also the county needs to choose to participate in the program, which is something that can be important to check. The Restaurant Meals Program is, however, available at all Cal State universities, regardless of whether the county participates. And especially for those people who are unhoused and might not have utility bills or mail, or a lease to be able to show in terms of which county you reside in, you can verify this through collateral sources, which once again is somebody outside the household who is willing to attest to the household circumstances. Okay, so we've gone through the process, we've submitted the application, we've got the benefits, and so now we need to be concerned about keeping those benefits. So CalFresh households are certified, which means the benefits are approved for a specific amount of time, but you're going to have to reapply at the end of that certification period for benefits to continue. Most CalFresh households are certified for 12 months with what's called a SAR 7, the semi-annual report, due after 6 months. Mandatory reports are the responsibility of the household to complete. So even if the county doesn't send you paperwork or reach out, there are certain changes if they happen sort of between the 6-month and 12-month check-in points where the household needs to report them. Some households with elderly or disabled members can be certified for 24 or 36 months with only annual reports due. And it's also important to note that after these reports are made, benefits are frozen in place and can only be changed under certain circumstances. So taking a look at some of those mandatory reports. So, the most common one is if the household's income changes and it goes above what's called the income reporting threshold, which is going to be 130% of the federal poverty level for a household of their size. And so that's a mandatory report. And you also have the Abod Rule, which is the Able-Bodied Adults Without Dependents Rule, which is a work requirement if you're an able-bodied adult without dependents. So if your work drops below 20 hours per week or $80 per month, you also need to report that to the county. There's a big caveat here for that, which is that Calworks and most GA programs have more mandatory reports due. And so, while it's important to keep these in mind, you also, if you're on more than one of these programs, you also need to know your reporting responsibilities for all of the programs that you're on, because they don't always have a perfect one-to-one lineup with what's asked for. So there are mandatory reports and there are voluntary reports, and pretty easy rule of thumb: if it's not mandatory, it's voluntary. So recipients can voluntarily report changes that may increase their benefits at any time. So some examples of that might be a change in household income, like the loss of a job, so a downward change in income or loss of hours. Someone moves into or out of the house or the home, an increase in one of the allowable deductions. These are all things that are worth reporting because it might cause an upward adjustment in the allotment period. So if the report is a change in household composition or income that would cause a decrease in benefits, counties must act on the report if it is verified. So that is also important to keep in mind. So we touched on this earlier, but there are the Abod rules, able-bodied adults without dependents. This category of people is those who are 18 to 50 years old and do not have children and are not disabled. So normally you can only receive CalFresh for 3 months in a 36-month period unless you work 20 hours per week or participate in an approved work program. There are exceptions to this: those who are mentally or physically unfit for work, those who are pregnant, if you're living with a household member under the age of 18, if you're living in a geographic area that has a waiver. All of those will mean you don't have to worry about the Abod rules. And right now, nobody has to, because we do have a statewide waiver in place through June 30th of 2023. So those are all the general rules. And now we have a couple of changes that have come into place for COVID-19. So they're what's called emergency allotments currently. So each month during the ongoing public health emergency, CDSS has permission to give each CalFresh household the maximum amount of benefits for their household size. This is distributed as a supplement to your regular CalFresh payment in the middle of the month. It's approved month to month, but it is generally expected to continue through to the end of the public health emergency. And also, there are some rules laid out in the ASIN, the All County Information Notice 18720, that has a detailed explanation of overissuance rules during the pandemic. But one of the big takeaways from that is that there shall be no overissuance if a household was entitled to any amount of CalFresh benefits while receiving emergency allotments, unless those benefits were trafficked. So as long as you still qualify for some benefits, even if there was a mistake, you're not going to have to worry about an overissuance. There are also some COVID changes to student eligibility. These are, 2 new exceptions to the rules that generally bar college students from getting CalFresh, and they're generally sort of positioned to they're more permissive of allowing college students to be in the program. So instead of needing to be eligible and expecting to work in work study, you just need to be eligible to participate in the work study program. You don't need to actually participate, and you don't need to have the expectation that you will participate in the program. The other route is if a student has an expected family contribution of $0, you can check that by looking at the FAFSA, and there should be, if anybody does have an EFC of 0, they should receive a letter from a California state body that also lays this out. And it's also important to note that these changes last for the student's entire certification period for the full time of the public health emergency and the following 30 days. And so because it's tied to the student's certification period, if you recertify during the public health emergency, they will use those rules forward, even if the public health emergency ends mid-period for you. Here are some resources and sources of law about the Calfresh program if you're curious. As I mentioned earlier, the Lisnick Calfresh guide is excellent and is very up to date. There's also the Manual of Policies and Procedures, which are the CDSS regulations governing the program. And you can also check all county letters, all county information notices, and all county welfare directors letters as well. Okay, so it's a lot of information about Calfresh, and now we're going to pivot and we're going to talk a little bit about Calworks, which is the
Elsie,
Yes.
before we go into Calworks, I just wanted to we have a little time we can pause for questions if anyone has questions they didn't get to put in the chat. But I also just wanted to make sure people know the materials will be shared. They'll be shared with all registrants. You don't need to request them separately in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions that they wanted to ask about Calworks? Excuse me, Calfresh.
Before, can we go back that last picture? I was trying to do a screenshot so I could have it with me now.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome.
Happy to.
All right.
I have a question. My name is Denisha. I'm from Cocoa Kids. Hi, I actually have two questions. So we're now seeing a lot of mixed households more than before. So if someone's applying and they're in a mixed household, but someone in that home is, one of the family members is not applying, but they still have to submit their income, is that income going to be counted even though they're not applying, but they live in the mixed home?
Yeah, it's counted on a prorated basis. So if it's a household of 4, one person is ineligible, their income is counted and, their income is reported, and then basically like 3/4 of it would be attributed for the Calfresh, 1/4 of it wouldn't be counted, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question, we try to give resources to families when they come in for childcare services, and we do talk about the Calfresh benefit, but sometimes we get, they think they have to, or the absent parent will have to pay back benefits, and so they're afraid to apply. Is that something that the absent parent has to pay back if the custodial parent is receiving Calfresh benefits?
That's not food stamps, but that is a rule in Calworks, and we can talk a little bit more. We don't go through it in the PowerPoint, but in Calworks, basically, if you part of the application process, if you are a single parent, is you're required to participate in the establishing, you're required to help the county, I guess, establish child support and pursue child support from the other parent.
Okay, but it doesn't apply to the Calfresh benefits.
Right, that's not a rule for Calfresh.
Perfect, thank you.
And then people ask, there's a couple questions about college students. Generally, I would say, like, why are they not eligible? That's like a political choice, right? I can't really say that. I think it's an old rule that I think comes from the vision of who college students are and who they aren't. There's a big push. There's a lot of organizations that are working on changing those rules. We, because of our funding, we're not allowed to work on work in that way. We're not allowed to do legislative advocacy. But the California Association of Food Banks might be able to connect you if that's something that you have more questions about. Homeless college student, the question isn't about whether or not you're homeless, but whether or not you're in college and if there's an exception to the rule. The exceptions, again, I would point to, we'll send you the materials. Some of them are listed here. They're also listed in the Calfresh guide. And if a student is a part-time student, could this disqualify him or her? You have to be a full-time student in order for the student rule to affect you. So if you're part-time, no, but if you're a full-time student, it could be a problem. With that, I'll go ahead and let you go ahead, Elsie, on Calworks. But also, you guys, you'll get Elsie's contact information after this. You get all of our contact information, and Elsie is quickly developing an expertise in student eligibility for Calfresh. So if you have other questions, you should feel free to reach out.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so so now we're going to pivot to Calworks, which is the California Work Opportunities and Responsibility to Kids program. So, just brief overview of what Calworks is it is the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. So that's at the federal level, and it's distributed as what's called a block grant. So what that means is that states have a lot of control over what their specific program looks like, and Calworks is ours. And here in California, it's designed as a cash aid program for children who are deprived of parental support and for their adult caretaker relatives. And so deprived is a term of art here, and that means at least one parent is absent, deceased, disabled, or unemployed. So with that in mind, who gets Calworks? It's called the Assistance Unit. And there are some members who are mandatory, because the Calworks program is designed to help support children who are facing a deprivation. You need to have an eligible child. So you need to be under the age of 18. Unless the child will graduate high school before turning 19, then you have a little bit of wiggle room there. Any eligible siblings or half siblings that are in the home also must be part of the assistance unit. Any adoptive or birth parents of the child in the home also have to be included. If a parent is a minor living with their parent, so a situation where the eligible child's grandparents are in the home, those grandparents must also be included as long as the parent is a minor. Also, the sponsor of a sponsored non-citizen has to be included in the assistance unit. There are also optional members, people who may be beneficial to include if it makes sense and who don't have to be included if it doesn't. Step parents, other eligible children in the home, so grandchildren or nieces, nephews, depending on the the sort of relationship everybody has together. Non-parent relative caretakers, also optional. It's important to note that pregnant women can be eligible in their second trimester, and SSI recipients are not eligible for Calworks, even though they are eligible for Calfresh. As with Calfresh, there are groups of immigrants who will in fact qualify for Calworks. Those are lawful permanent residents, so green card holders, refugees and asylees, VAWA applicants with a prima facie case determination, T visa holders or applicants with a prima facie case, and U visa applicants. Okay, so now we have an idea of who is going to be in the assistance unit and getting these benefits. And so now we're going to take a look at financial eligibility. So there's also two different tests to worry about here, but it's a little different from Calfresh. So there are two separate income limits, gross and countable. And so it's important to note that certain income is not included. So SSI, loans, a child's income, tax refunds, income of a non-needy relative caretaker, or federal financial aid, including work study. You don't need to include those in our calculation. And in order to be countable, income must be reasonably anticipated. This is similar to the Calfresh rule. So the amount and the approximate date of payment must be known. If either of those are unknown, it's not reasonably anticipated until you receive it. It's also an important exception that the income of an abuser that requires the abuser's permission to access is not required to be counted. And the Calworks program has different levels, so different tests depending on if you're a Region 1 county or a Region 2 county. So Region 1 counties tend to be those who have a higher cost of living. So, the Bay Area counties are going to fall into that category: Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco. You can see the list here at the bottom of the screen. And if you're not Region 1, you're in Region 2. Okay, so looking at the financial eligibility test, the first step that we're going to have to do is we're going to need to check the household's gross income against the minimum basic standards of adequate care, with the MIBSAC. It's an ugly acronym, but that's what we're going to call it. And so gross income is calculated as the total income for the assistance unit minus $450 for each working person. So it's important to make sure that you do deduct that $450 per working person if you're running these numbers by hand. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can take a look and see what the MIBSAC amounts are based on the assistance unit size. So the same way that Calfresh has a household and the test and benefits are based on the household size in Calworks, the assistance unit determines both the amount of benefits and the numbers you're going to have to compare it against. And you can see that these numbers are going to be good through to June 30th of 2023. Okay, so we have our assistance unit. We've gone through the gross income and checked it against the MIBSAC. Now we need to worry about the net income. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to eliminate excluded or exempt income. So for unearned income, you're going to count all of that. For unearned disability-based income, you can subtract up to $600 from that amount before you sort of put it into the pot to compare. And earned income is a little different. So you're going to take that $600 deduction for the unearned disability income, and if there's any left over, up to the total amount of $600, depending on the house or the assistance unit and their circumstances, you're going to subtract that amount from the earned income, and then you take that number and divide it by 2. Yeah, so you also see a couple of exceptions here, or sorry, I should say a couple of different terms here. So there are what's called exempt and non-exempt assistance units. Exempt units are all adults in the assistant, or when all adults in the assistance unit are receiving disability-based income. Non-exempt is everyone else. And so, these maximum aid payments are going to increase effective October 1st of 2023. So on the left-hand side of the screen this time, switching it up a little bit, you can just sort of see the comparison and, look at and see that there is going to be an increase coming in a couple of days. So in particular, when you are calculating the monthly grant, what you do is you take the maximum aid payment, which is what was on that chart on the previous screen. You subtract the net income that we calculated earlier, and then that number that you get after that subtraction is going to be the monthly grant amount that the assistance unit can expect. Unlike Calfresh, there is a resource limit for Calworks. Currently, it's $10,211, with a little bit more if someone in the assistance unit is 60 or older. It's going to be increasing on January 1st of 2023. Now, it's important to note that as with income, there are both countable and excluded resources. So countable resources is going to be cash on hand or in bank accounts, stocks and bonds, some non-recurring lump sum payments like inheritance or lawsuit winnings. Excluded resources are going to be the home the family lives in, tools of your trade, a car with an equity value that's less than $25,000 or is used to transport someone in the home who is disabled, or that is given as a gift or a donation. Okay, so we've got our assistance unit, we've gone through all the financial tests, we figured out what the monthly benefit's going to be. So now we need to worry about keeping that benefit. And so it's important to note that Calworks has a 60-month time limit for adults, which means that adults can only receive Calworks for 60 months of their entire lives. When the 60 months is up, their aid will be cut. But it's also important to note that that just means that the adults portion of the allotment isn't going to be coming in. The child who is facing deprivation can still receive aid. This went up from 48 months on June 1st of 2022, so pretty recently. They added an extra year to the clock. It's important to note that because of this lifelong time limit, adults should make strategic choices about when they're choosing to receive aid so that they can maximize aid over the course of their lifetime. We also have what are called extenders and clock stoppers. Extenders are exceptions to receive additional months of aid after that 60 months is up. Clock stoppers are months that aren't counted towards the 60-month limit. So some examples, if you're an adult who's 60 years old or over, if you're disabled, if you're dealing with the effects of domestic violence, if you're the needy caretaker of a dependent child of the court, these can all offer you ways to sort of navigate that 60-month time limit and potentially get a little bit more aid. Calworks also has a welfare to work rule. So adults, and that's also in this case, children over 16 who are not enrolled in school are expected to participate in work, job training, or other education and work activities. And participants may be sanctioned for failing to comply with this part of the program. The hourly requirements are going to vary based on household composition. There are certain exemptions, such as, under COVID, we have exemptions. Those who are pregnant, if they're unable to participate, disabled individuals and individuals over 60. All of those categories of people don't need to worry about welfare to work rules. And it's also important to note that for welfare to work, 60 months of participation are required. What this kind of translates into is if you're an adult and you're eligible for aid, you're going to have to, and you're not exempt, you're going to have to make sure you're complying with welfare to work. They also have supportive services that are available through the program, things like childcare, transportation, reimbursement for other ancillary expenses. And they also have specialized support services as well. So domestic violence services, mental health and substance abuse treatments, things like that. Another important part of keeping Calworks is the SAR-7 and the redetermination. So similarly to Calfresh, benefits are approved for a 12-month period, and benefits are mostly frozen for 6-month intervals. The SAR-7 semi-annual report is due at the 6-month mark, and that's a short report designed ideally to capture changes to income, address, and other basic eligibility criteria. Oh, excuse me, I had a frog in my throat. So at the end of that 12-month period, you're then going to have what's called the redetermination. So you're going to be basically submitting a new application and going through the full process again. And it's important to note that in an ideal world, this would be aligned with Calfresh and Medi-Cal, but that doesn't always work out that way. So it's important to just double check to make sure that you're not missing any of these deadlines, because missing your redetermination will result in having aid stopped. Much like Calfresh, Calworks has mid-period reports, some of which are mandatory, some of which are voluntary. Mandatory reports, Calworks households also have a income reporting threshold. So if your income rises above that, you need to make sure to report it to the county. You change your address. If anybody in the AU has a fleeing felon status, if anybody is, if there are any violations of probation or parole, these all need to be reported to the county, regardless of whether they reach out to you first or send you paperwork. And much like Calfresh, any change that's not mandatory is a voluntary report. And you can voluntarily report any change that may increase your benefits at any time. So similar sorts of changes to look at here, loss of a job or lowered income, someone moves into or out of the home, increase in an allowable deduction. And if the report is a change in household composition or income that would cause a decrease in benefits, the counties must act on that report if it is verified. So very similar to Calfresh this way. So Calworks also has some other things that can go along with it. You should automatically receive Calfresh and Medi-Cal. You can also get an immediate need payment, which is $200 at the time of application, or the whole amount within 3 days. There can also be non-recurring special needs payments, which is a one-time emergency assistance payment of up to $600. And people who are on Calworks also get what's called transitional Calfresh. So when Calworks benefits stop because the family is over income, Calfresh benefits will continue unchanged for 5 months. The family can reapply for regular Calfresh benefits during this time, and it can just transfer over. And there is no limit to the number of times the household may qualify for transitional benefits. So, you don't have to worry about anything like a clock or running up against a hard cap there. Calworks also has homelessness prevention programs. There's Calworks diversion. So payments or services issued for Calworks applicants to help the family meet its need to survive a short-term crisis. You receive that in lieu of ongoing monthly benefits. We also have family stabilization, which is intensive case management and services for families in crisis. They offer things like credit repair or referrals to legal services through this program. They can also pay for rent owed or other costs to prevent eviction and homelessness. They have the Calworks Homeless Assistance part of the program. There's the permanent homeless assistance part of the program, which is you can pay up to 2 months of back rent to prevent eviction, although it's important to note that this is when the family has a pay or quit notice in hand. There's also the disaster side of the program, which is available for families that become homeless or at risk of homelessness as a result of a state or federally declared natural disaster. And we also have the housing support program, which helps families experiencing homelessness to get permanent housing while providing wraparound support to foster housing retention. And they can provide housing and stabilization services like rental assistance, security deposits, helping you meet some of these other financial barriers that might stand between you and secure housing. Calworks also has a domestic violence waiver. So survivors of domestic violence can request a waiver to waive any program requirement except the requirement of deprivation. So, needing to have a child who is deprived of parental support, or you cannot waive the income and asset requirements, and you also cannot waive the homeless assistance part of the program. So some common uses of the domestic violence waiver include time on aid, exceptions to welfare to work, exceptions to paternity establishment and child support cooperation, which, as Jessica touched on earlier, are normally required under the program. Okay, so that was a lot of Calworks information. I think now it's time to turn it over to Jessica, although if we do have some time, I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Right, Elsie, can you stop sharing and I'll share, I updated the version that I have.
Absolutely.
And then there are a couple of questions, or there's at least, yeah, I see 2 in the chat. You want to see if there are questions you can answer if that's something you want to throw to me while I do this?
Yeah, of course.
How's it looking, Elsie?
Are they the 2 questions at the bottom of the chat?
Yeah, they just came in.
Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing one from Hannah Morris about disabled adult child benefits. And so I just want to make.
Yeah, no, that's a Social Security benefit. Honestly, we don't really have the time to go through this today, but if you send me an email, I can send you some more information. But it's basically the child can get Social Security benefits on their parents' work record. Herman asked about rental assistance program. There's actually a couple different rental assistance programs in the Calworks. Like the Calworks homeless assistance is actually pretty broad, and there's a couple different programs. I would say it can cover back rent, can cover moving expenses. You can cover, like, if you need deposits for your utilities or things like that. Ultimately, I think my advice would be, if there's something that you think would help your client who is housed but at risk of losing their housing, if there's something that they need that can help them keep their housing, I would say to just ask the county if they're on Calworks. And if that's denied, you can reach out to us and we can see if it's something we can help with. If you have a client who is unhoused and there's something Calworks could potentially provide to help them become housed, that may also be covered depending on the client's circumstances. So again, I would recommend your client just ask the county. A lot of the programs actually don't, they're worded very broadly just in that way to kind of help people either maintain housing or become housed. So I would say ask for what you need, and if it's denied, you can reach out to legal aid and we can see if it's something that we can help with. For DV cases, no, there doesn't need to be an active court case. You just need to tell the county that you've experienced domestic violence. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get into general assistance, and I'll pause again at the end of the presentation to get to questions. I think we're going to 11:30. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll pause, but I have general assistance, it won't take too long, but I also have some social security information. And I don't have we did put public charge in the agenda, but I actually just forgot to edit that. The public charge rule actually just changed. It just came down. And I haven't had the chance to prepare a presentation on it, so we won't be able to work through that today. Excuse me. I would also point out I have this like kind of random asthma / allergy cough, so I might cough a couple times throughout. So sorry about that in advance. All right, so general assistance is a cash assistance program for people who are very low income. It is state mandated, but the counties each design, fund, and administer their GA programs. So they really vary county to county. We have 58 counties in California. There are 58 different general assistance programs. The amount that you receive, whether you receive cash versus vouchers, what the like income and resource rules, all of that, all varies county to county. For information about Contra Costa's program, you can go to the EHSD website listed here. Generally for everyone, general assistance is going to be a program of last resort. You can't qualify for any other assistance program, and you have to have almost no money. If you're over age 65, they're probably going to require you to apply for Ssi or a CAPI, cash assistance program for immigrants. In most counties, but not all, although including Contra Costa, operates as a loan. If you start receiving Ssi or CAPI, then the amount of general assistance that you receive is going to be deducted from your retro payment. And if you have a non-citizen who has a sponsor, that sponsor must also agree to repay GA, generally speaking. And then Contra Costa County, in Contra Costa County, GA goes to indigent adults who are determined needy and not supported by other means. You have to be present and physically reside in Contra Costa County for at least 15 consecutive days before you can qualify. It's okay if you don't have a permanent address, but then you should sign a form called the intention to reside as part of your application. In order to qualify, you can be an indigent legal adult, a married minor, or a minor who doesn't qualify for support under any other program. Contra Costa doesn't award GA to emancipated minors. But I would say if you have a minor who isn't receiving any other assistance, there's probably another program that they qualify for. GA is probably not going to be the best option for them. So I would reach out if you meet a minor who you think is only eligible for GA. We should talk through that. That's probably not true. The first program I would recommend would be Calworks. In addition, excuse me, it's available for citizens and qualified non-citizens. The list here reflects the group of citizens that we most often see, though it's not an exhaustive list. There are certain people who are just outright barred from receiving general assistance. People who are fleeing felons, this means that they have a felony in another place and are actively avoiding prosecution for it. Individuals who are placed outside of the county and non-medical out-of-home care facilities. People who are living in Contra Costa but don't intend to stay in Contra Costa. People who have violated felony probation or parole. People on SSI. People who receive GA in another county for at least 3 months, or who are sanctioned from GA in another county. That's 3 months in the last 12 months, not in a lifetime. Adults who timed out of Calworks or are ineligible for Calworks due to sanctions or penalties. This one will last until the youngest child is age 18, whether or not those children or that child is living with the applicant. And that one can be a bit difficult because you'll see people who have had their children removed from their care for whatever reason, and they are not eligible for GA until that child turns 18, even if that child isn't with them. And then if you're living in an institution where your basic needs are met, there's no eligibility to GA, and for undocumented immigrants. There's anything that's available in cash is going to be considered income for GA purposes. This includes loans, which are generally not accounted for most other things. Rental assistance is a big one in this time during the pandemic. In-kind aid, which is defined as non-cash benefits that are received for an item of need. So if you receive free or reduced rent, housing, utilities, food, clothing, transportation, and it covers the entire month, then that's going to be counted as income against you. And then they're going to, excuse me, make you apply for all sources of income you might be eligible for, which is primarily Social Security or unemployment. But I've also seen like vets benefits, for instance, be an issue. And then Contra Costa County has a $50 resource limit. Oh, sorry. Has a $50 resource limit. There are some things that are excluded, but yeah, $50 is that's pretty low. In Contra Costa, you can apply online for general assistance, which is really huge. That'll be the website that you apply through will be changing in a couple of months. I think it's February, although I forget exactly when. But that's really helpful. You can also apply by phone or in person, and there are 3 offices here: Antioch, Pleasant Hill, and Richmond. I listed their addresses here. I did put hours may vary due to COVID-19, but I just need to update the slide. They're actually fully open now. You shouldn't have COVID-related closures to the offices anymore. There are certain verifications that people are going to be required to provide. I won't read through them. There's a list here, but I would just make sure that people are aware that in order to get on, they do need to provide this type of information when they're applying. And once you go through the application process, there you'll get, if you get approved, the grant is $336 for an individual, $375 a month for individuals with disabilities. The grant is provided on an EBT card, which is the same way that all the benefits we've talked about so far today would be paid. If someone is getting, so 53% of your GA payment is for housing. If you have a rental obligation, that 53% will actually go straight to your landlord. It won't be put onto your card. And 47% of the grant is for the claimant, or for the recipient, excuse me, and they'll get food. That's for food, their personal needs, transportation. There are a couple grant supplements I didn't list here, but just know that they're available. Unhoused clients can get a housing allowance, that 53% of the grant, for 30 days if they request a shelter bed and there isn't a bed available. If there is a shelter bed available, but the client has a good reason for why they can't stay in it, or if they, if a person does accept the shelter bed, then their grant is going to be reduced to 47% after 30 days. And people who get GA should also apply for Calfresh and Medi-Cal because they'll qualify if they qualify for GA, but it's not an automatic process. If a GA recipient is employable, they're only entitled to GA for 90 days. Sorry, that's right where the window with you guys are, is 90 days in a 12-month period. And there are a couple exemptions. So you can be temporarily unemployable, in which case you have a short-term medical condition that'll prevent you from working for 3 to 12 months, in which case you would be exempt for however long that time is. You would need medical documentation. And then there's long-term unemployable, where you have a medical condition that prevents work for 12 plus months, or you're over age 65. And if you're in that last level, unemployables, you're definitely going to be required to apply for SSI. People without verified disability are going to be required to be available for work or to seek employment. And people with substance abuse problems are going to be sent to participate in treatment programs. Excuse me, there's a quarterly report due, the GAQR7. People are required to report whether there are changes in their circumstances. You still have to submit it. It's like the SAR-7, so even if there are no changes, you still have to submit it. If there is a change in your income, you have to report within 5 calendar days, and you need to submit a mid-quarter change report form. You can be sanctioned from GA. there's a 180-day discontinuance, that's what a sanction is. If you have a willful failure or failure to cooperate, basically if you don't follow the rules like intentionally, then on the first instance you'll be sanctioned for 180 days. If you have good cause, you can avoid a sanction. If you have a negligent failure to cooperate, so you unintentionally violated the program rules, then you can be sanctioned after the third one. And that's all I have for GA. Let me see if there's a couple questions in the chat. Can unaccompanied youth under 18 apply for GA? I think it depends on what their immigration status is. If they're coming in with no, like if they're unaccompanied youth with no immigration status, then no, they wouldn't be eligible based on their immigration status. If they do have some sort of immigration status, again, GA is probably not the program that is best for them, but the analysis of whether or not they qualify depends on what their immigration status is. There's no like specific rule for unaccompanied youth. But a lot of unaccompanied youth don't have any immigration status, so it'll make it hard for them to get benefits until they have some sort of status granted, like a SIGIS application or something like that. For any of these, for people who are U visa applicants, are derivatives eligible too? Yeah, they're if they have derivatives, the derivative is also like a U visa applicant in the view of this, right? They're also applying for a U visa, it's just through another person. So yes. If a person is receiving Calfresh, it's over income. It depends on why they're over income. I don't have too much time to go into that, but that's called Transitional Calfresh. And if you go to the Calfresh guide that we recommended, they talk more about that. So I'll get into Social Security, and then depending on how much time we have after this, I'll circle back and answer questions more fully, or answer as many questions as we have time for. Social Security and SSI. There it is. Oh, sorry, this is just a misplaced slide. This is actually about appealing your GA. And just to know that you can file an appeal, you have 30 days from the date of the notice. If you have a case like this where someone needs to appeal something, you should definitely reach out. That's the sort of thing Elsie and I can help with and potentially represent on. Okay, Social Security. So there's three main types of Social Security benefits that I think people are most familiar with. Retirement, SSDI, which is disability insurance, and SSI. We can quickly talk about retirement, but honestly, most people don't actually have a problem with their retirement. The amount that you received is going to be based on your age and your work history. I put the list here so you can see what people's full retirement age is. If you're born after 1960, then your full retirement age is 67. You can get early retirement starting at age 62. The earlier you retire before your full retirement age, the less amount of benefits you'll get, and that's lifelong. So if you retire at 62 and you hit your full retirement age at age 67, then it's not like your grant will go up once you hit age 67. For as long as you draw retirement, which is until you die, you maintain your eligibility for it, your grant will be at a lower amount. There's also until you hit if you're on early retirement, then until you hit your full retirement age, there are limits on your annual income. And if you go over that annual income limit, you can be asked to repay it. That's, I think, the one exception. That's really the only problem I've seen with people who are getting early retirement, is that they were working and end up with overpayments. So like I said, if you retire early, they reduce the amount of benefits that you received. There's just some charts here so that you can kind of see what that looks like. On the other side, if you delay your retirement, then they increase the amount that you're eligible for. So if your full retirement age is age 67 and you wait until age 70 to retire, then you'll get 124% of your grant. So like, just to be, I'm not going to try to do the math on the fly actually, because that's almost certain to fail me. But that's really all I have about Social Security retirement. Like I said, most people don't really have problems with their retirement, so we don't have to do a lot of work on that. Social Security disability is a federal insurance program In order to qualify, you have to be an eligible worker, but then if you are an eligible worker, your family members, certain family members, including spouse, an ex-spouse who didn't get remarried, a child, or an adult disabled child can also receive money on your record if you qualify. In order to be an eligible worker, you have to have a Social Security disability. Sorry, I got distracted by this here. So you have to be unable to work due to a severe medically certified condition that has lasted or is expected to last 12 months. And I'll go into that definition a little more. And then you have to have a prior work history. So you have to earn credits. And I actually updated this yesterday for the dollar amount, but I forgot to update the year. So in 2022, you earn 1 credit for every $1,500 you make, $1,510. And then once you have, you can only get up to 4 credits in a year. So basically that's what, about $6,000. Once you earn that amount, you'll get your 4 credits for 2022. Just quick note, this is not a needs-based program. There are no asset limits, there's no income limitations. You're either eligible worker or you're not. The amount of credits you need in order to qualify for SSDI depends on your age. So the fewest amount is 6 credits for people under age 24. Once you're hitting age 62, that's 40 credits, 20 of which are in the last 10 years. And then in the middle there, it just kind of depends on how old you are. So disability is really strict for Social Security. The inability to engage in substantial gainful activity, which has its own definition, by reason of a medically determinable impairment, physical or mental, or a combination of both, which can reasonably be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months or result in death. It's a high bar. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to apply or helped someone else apply. I think there's this view that a lot of people get Social Security and they aren't even disabled. That's probably not true, although I'm sure there are some people who have gone through that, who have, found out a way to game the system. But it really is difficult to meet this definition of disability with Social Security. They're looking at a 5-step process. This is the one I forgot. So that number on step 1 is 15. Oh, no, that's right. So that's, I'm sorry, substantial gainful activity this year means it's a dollar amount, more or less. If you're making more than $1,350 a month, by definition for Social Security, you're not disabled. If you are, then you look, or if you're not making over $1,350 a month, you go to step 2, is your condition severe, which means does it interfere with basic work activity? If yes, we'll go to step 3. Does your impairment meet or medically equal a listed impairment? Social Security, you can Google the listing of impairments and it will give you a list of diagnoses with different symptoms for each one. And if you can satisfy the symptoms that are on the list, then you'll be found to quote unquote equal a listing, or excuse me, meet a listing, and you would be able to qualify for disability at this stage. If you don't meet or equal a listing, then we'll move on to step 4. Can you do the work that you have previously done? If yes, you're not disabled. If no, we'll go to step 5, and then Social Security has to prove, they have to answer this question: if there's any other work that exists in significant numbers in the national economy. And this is really a problem for a lot of people if you're really banging on winning at step 5, because the jobs that they rely on is based on a list that was created in like 1991 or something like that. So the jobs that they rely on are jobs that don't exist anymore in like our world because of computers. So I've had people who they say can be an addresser, like writing addresses on envelopes. They don't do that anymore. Table makers, that's a pretty that's done a lot by that's not a job done by hand anymore. A lot of that is done by machines. Mexican food maker is a weird one. I don't know why it specifies Mexican food, but that's one that they rely on. Admittedly, we do still have Mexican food workers in our economy, but people who do laundry, like it's a list, like I said, it's just made in 1991. So the types of jobs that they're relying on are just not jobs that we have anymore. Once you're approved, the amount of benefits that you get will depend on your work history, both the number of years that you worked and the amount of earnings. that's skewed towards lower wage workers. So if you made like I don't think it tops out anywhere, but if you're a high wage worker, you're not going to be making the same amount that you made when you were working on SSDI. Once you've been on SSDI for 24 months, you can also qualify for Medicare benefits. You may be eligible for Calfresh or Ssi, depending on what your income is. There is a 5-month waiting period from the date that you become disabled to when you actually receive benefits, but because the application process takes so long, generally, by the time they determine that you're disabled, your 5 months will have already passed. So you don't actually have a delay in getting the money. And then certain family members can also qualify on the applicant's record. And this is what I'm talking about for disabled adult children. That's one of the people who can earn on your record, but you have to be receiving in order for someone to receive on your record. You can apply at Social Security. If you're denied, you have 60 days. And I am going to kind of push through this. One thing to note, people do have, once you're found to be disabled, even though quote, it should be like quote unquote permanent, that it is reviewed periodically. So if you're expected to improve within 6 to 18 months, you'll be reviewed within 6 to 18 months if medical improvements are expected. If medical improvements are possible, you're reviewed within 3 years. And then if medical improvement is never expected, you're going to still be reviewed within 7 years. It's not uncommon pre-pandemic. I saw people who hadn't been reviewed for 10 to even like 15 years, but Social Security, I think, is working on catching up on those. So that's less common these days. And if someone's on SSDI, they go back to work and start earning too much money, they may also be terminated. That's all I have on SSDI. I'm going to push through SSI and then I'll circle back. I do see there's a couple comments in the chat. So SSI is a federal cash benefit program for low-income people who are disabled or age 65 or older. This can include infants and children. There are 3 main eligibility requirements. So you have to be either over age 65 or meet that definition of disability we just talked about. You need to be low income, which means your income limit is, your countable income is less than the current benefit rate. And the resource limit is $2,000 for individuals, $3,000 for a couple. These amounts were set in, I think, like the 70s and haven't been adjusted. So they're really low. You know, it's very easy to go over $2,000 at this point. Especially if you're a person who's over age 65, but also if you have disabilities. And then you need to either be a citizen or a qualified immigrant. Resources, there are some things that don't count against you. The home you live in, 1 car for transportation, household goods and personal effects. That's the things that are in the house with you for the most part. If you have like if you own a Picasso, that's probably going to count against you. If your like wedding ring was like a $10,000 diamond, that might count against your asset limit. Burial space doesn't count. Insurance policies, you can have as many as you want, but it's a combined face value of less than $1,500 that we're looking at. And then retroactive SSI for a short period of time and grants, scholarships, or education payments for 9 months. Pretty much everything else is going to count towards that $2,000 resource limit. And I will point out, since we're talking about it, insurance policies, what we look at in determining their value is the cash surrender value. And if you have like whole life insurance, that cash surrender value grows over time. So you can have a policy that may start out as being not like it counts towards your resource limit if it's more than 1,500. It may start out as not being a problem, but you need to watch how it grows, how that value grows. Otherwise, eventually it could push you over and no longer be eligible. I see that a lot. If you get approved, the current benefit in California is $1,040 for individuals, $1,765 for couples. That amount changes depending. So if you're blind, there's like a little boost already, but it can also change based on your living facilities. If you're unhoused or don't have access to kitchen facilities, you get a little bit more. If you're not paying fair market value rent or food, so like if you're, living with your adult children and you pay your children, $300 for you know, you pay them $300 rent for honestly anywhere in Contra Costa County, you're not paying fair market value rent. And so your SSI is going to automatically be reduced. If you're getting SSI, you automatically get Medi-Cal, and you should apply for Calfresh. Ssdi and Ssi, people get really confused. So there's this chart here just to kind of help people understand the difference. It's important to know the difference because if someone is on Ssdi, there are no income or asset rules. So they can really do whatever they want. If you're on SSI, it's really important to make sure that you take a lot of care to stay under those income and asset rules so that you don't end up having to repay your overpayments. SSI, Social Security doesn't review eligibility in the same frequency that counties do. So it's not like you'll go over 1 month and then you'll get an overpayment. They tend not to notice for a long time. You see that grant is $1,000 a month. So it's not uncommon to get like a $10,000, $15,000 overpayment from Social Security if you go over that resource limit or over income for SSI. And that's, you know, that can be really shocking for someone. That can be really daunting. So it's important for people to know what they're on and what rules are subject to. The application rules are the same. I would point out you have a 60-day appeal deadline if you need. You should have information, this information here. I included and it'll be on the slides, but we don't need to talk about. Here's information on how you can appeal either online or you can download what's called the request for reconsideration and submit it to one of your whatever office. Here's our contact information. I see I have a couple questions in the chat. And then I can take any other questions. Does anyone know of an agency that helps Contra Costa residents apply for SSI? Unfortunately, there's not a lot in Contra Costa. There's the Hawkins Center, takes some people. That's all I know that takes people for free. But also if you're applying for SSI, you can go to a private attorney. They will take a piece of your retros, but they'll help you get on, and that could be helpful for some people. So I would recommend referring people to private attorneys as well. And we have a list of referrals that we use if you would like me to share. Although that list is broader, it's for the whole Bay Area, but it does have a couple Contra Costa attorneys.
Jessica, excuse me, can you say once again for Contra Costa County, the one place that you do know of, please?
Called the Hawkins Center.
Hawkins, like W-A, I'm sorry.
H-A-W.
Okay, Hawkins. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And yeah, unfortunately, Contra Costa is really a service dead zone. There's just not a lot of services in general in Contra Costa County. And so that includes help with Social Security. Okay. To qualify for SSDI, do you have to have engaged in continuous work prior to injury? So you have to have earned work credits, and they usually have a temporal requirement, like you've earned so many credits in so many years, but that varies based on your age. So I would say to look it up for the individual. But for instance, if you are 62, it's 40 credits within the last 20 years. And so 40 credits is 10 years of work. So over 20 years, you had to have done 10 years of work. So yeah, like I said, I would say like Social Security has those charts if you just Google them, but it's available on the Social Security website and you can look it up for an individual. Thanks for the compliment on the slide. I don't think I created it, but I will take that. Do child support payments outside of the child's household count as the child's assets or income? So child support is income of the child. So if the child is applying for SSI, that's a problem. If one of the children's siblings are applying for SSI, doesn't matter. And if the parent is applying for SSI, it doesn't matter. Are outside of home parents also liable if there's a need for a back payment? I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, to be honest. I know if you're, I think, so if you, some people on SSI or on Social Security, based on disability, have to have what's called an authorized representative. And no, that's they have to have a representative payee. Sorry, it's been a long week. Some people are just like Social Security, if they don't feel like you can handle your affairs, they're going to make you have a representative payee. You can also choose to have a representative payee if you want. Children under 18 all have to have a rep payee. I think maybe once you get to 16 or 17, you might be able to not have one, but I forget. So if you have to have a rep payee, then you as the recipient and your representative payee are responsible for repaying the money, but I'm pretty sure you're the only two. Specifically looking at parent eligibility to repay, I would have to look that up. I don't remember off the top of my head. I see there's a question about public charge. I briefly mentioned kind of in the middle, but no, that was just a mistake. We aren't able to go over public charge. The rule actually just changed, and so I just haven't had the time to make a presentation on that. But I would refer you to the National Immigrant Law Center, NILC, NILC. They're putting out a lot of information for, it's not necessarily client facing yet. They're still working on it because like I said, but they've put out information for organizations. So I would point you there if you have questions about public charge or are looking for information. Honestly, no, I haven't been taking notes on the question, so I don't have the ability to send you an answer in writing to them. I have, I've just been kind of free recalling them or answering them as they've come up, but this is recorded still, so there's a record of them that you could refer back to. Would a 17-year-old who's blind and autistic, doesn't speak, came to the U.S. legally qualify for disability benefits? I can't answer that because of how Social Security determines disability. I would recommend, if you think they might be, that you should apply and honestly see what they say. The disability standard is quite high, and part of what they'll look at is if they're getting treatment, what kind of records exist. That's not the sort of question that I can ask. I just recommend that you apply if you think you might be. Keepyourbenefits.org. I see the link. I am not familiar with this website, so I can't speak to how reliable it is, but thanks for sharing for other people. I would also just point out our contact information is here. If you have questions or if you have questions, you can reach out to Ssdi and I, and we can try to help you. Please don't give out our contact information to your clients, just because we quickly be inundated. If you do have clients who need help, I would recommend that you use the phone number here that goes to our legal advice line. I will say our call center can get quite busy sometimes. If you have someone who is trying to call and really can't get through, you can reach out to Ssdi and I. We can't really take referrals that way regularly, but if there's a problem with the call center, we may be able to escalate that within the organization to try to get help that way.